Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to make this cool endless loop animation and I really hope you will enjoy this one, and if you do, please don't forget to leave that like, it will really help the channel. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to learn in the most efficient and seamless way, be sure to check out my courses. I carefully designed them to take you from beginner skills all the way to full character illustration in the shortest time possible. So if you're interested in something like that, please check out the link in the description. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first thing I want to do is to remove the cube here. So let's just select it, and we can remove the light as well. So I will hold shift, select the light as well, press X and delete. And I want to create some, turning gears, because I think that looks quite great when creating a loop like this. And fortunately, there's an add-on in Blender that will help us with that. So just go into the edit preferences and activate the extra objects add-on. You will find it in the add-on sections when you search for extra. And you might already have this activated because I use it almost in every tutorial. So just find the add mesh extra object, check the box, and close the preferences, and you should have all of these new options right here when you press Shift A for adding new objects. And just go down, search for gears, and let's add a gear. That's the first thing I want to do here right now. And now just expand this window right here and you can modify a lot of options for the gear, including the number of teeth and stuff like that, but I want to keep that at 12. So let's just move on and let's adjust the base width to something like this, so it's a little bit more chunky, and then we'll play with some of these preferences right here, to make the teeth a little bit larger, something like this maybe. Now I will leave everything as is, and let's just press H to hide the object, and let's press Shift A and we'll add another one. So let's go gears again and choose a gear. Now we'll need to modify this because I want this gear, to be interlocked and turning at the same time. So we'll need a way how to calculate, the number of turns. And the easiest thing is to do just 2:1 ratio. So either you do double or half the number of the teeth. So let's do 6 here. And basically we want to lower the radius, so we can do that 2:1 turn ratio. So let's modify this to 0.5. So we'll create this smaller gear. So let's now modify this, because this is not working anymore, these settings right here. So we need to reduce the base size to something like this, let's say. Okay, I think this will work just fine. So let's press G then X, and we'll need to move this 1.5 meters minus and confirm with enter. So now if we press Alt H and unhide the larger gear, we're exactly where we want to be. And now we just need to rotate this so they interlock. So let's select the main gear and press R then Z to rotate on the Z axis, and we'll choose 15 degrees and confirm, because 360 divided by 12 is 30, and we'll need to turn half of that angle, so that's 15. And now we can see that this kind of goes inside a little bit, but we can adjust that shape a little bit later. Nothing to worry about at this point. And I want to make this a little bit more simple. So let's go into the edit mode, and I will go for edge select by pressing 2 and hold Alt and select this loop right here. Now additionally I will hold Shift and just select all of these edges around. And press Ctrl X to dissolve them. And I want to do the same thing with the other one, but before I do, let's alt click this loop right here, hold Alt Shift and select the other one on the other side, and let's press Ctrl E, that's the edge menu, and let's choose Bridge Edge Loops. That will create this geometry and close this up for us. So we can now press A to select all and Shift N to recalculate the normals in case they're wrong. And now let's tab out and let's select this smaller gear, and we'll do the same thing here. So tab into the edit mode, and first of all I will Alt Shift click and choose all of these loops, press Ctrl X and delete them, and now Alt Shift select these, press Ctrl E and Bridge Edge Loops, and again I will make sure that we have the normals correct. And now we can take care of that overlap. So let's go to a top view by pressing 7 on a numpad and enable an X-ray view right here, and I will hit W once, switch to the vertex select mode and just drag a selection around like this to select all of these vertices. And now let's press S and then Shift Z to make sure we are only scaling on X and Y axis. and just do something like this. Okay, that will work just fine. So we can now tab out and disable the X-ray view. And let's create some background. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane here. And I want to make this larger. So let's tab into the edit mode. Let's press S and then 2 to make this twice the size and confirm. And I don't want this circle to get in the way. So I will just switch this back to the select box, tab out, and we can now select these gears. Look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, and let's go here and change this to vertex snapping. And now we can press G then Z and hold Ctrl until we snap it right here. So we are sure that the gears are sitting down on the plane. Now let's take care of the camera. So let's hit 0 on a numpad, select the camera, and we'll need to hit period on a keyboard and switch to 3D cursor. So now we are able to rotate our camera around that. And let's press R then X twice to rotate around local X axis. And let's turn it like this so we have a better view of our scene from top down. And now we just need to take care of the animation. So first of all, I want these gears to be turning and keep them interlocked. So let's select the main gear and let's expand the timeline a little bit. Let me select it once again and let's press N to expand the side panel. Let's go to the item menu, and first thing I want to create a keyframe on the Z rotation. So right click and insert single keyframe. And now we can go all the way to the end of the animation and insert 360 degrees rotation. But first I want to calculate the length for my animation. So let's go to the output settings and let's set this to 30 frames per second. And I want it to be around 5 seconds long. So that will take us 150 frames. So let's enter 150 for the length of the animation. And now that we know where our animation ends, we can just scrub through the timeline to frame 150. And let's press R, then Z and 360 on the keyboard. Let's confirm. And you can see this keyframe changed. So right click and insert single keyframe. So now we have 2 keyframes. And when you scrub through the timeline, you can see it rotating. But when you play it back, you can see it accelerating. And to make this animation looping, we need a linear interpolation. So let's hover over the timeline and we can press T and select different interpolation for our keyframes. And instead of Bezier, which is right now, we'll choose linear. So now it will turn at a constant speed. So let's select the small one and let's go to the frame 1. And now let's do the same thing. So on the Z rotation, let's insert single keyframe and let's go all the way to the 150 frame. And before you do, make sure you have this set to median point again, not the 3D cursor. Let's hit R, then Z and minus 720 for the rotation. Let's confirm. And again, we'll right click here and insert single keyframe. So the rotation direction is correct, but the speed isn't right because again, we need to hit T and choose linear interpolation. And now they will turn the way we want them to. So that's it for the gears. Basically, we're finished. And now we need to set up some camera movement. And basically what I want to do is to create like a repeated pattern of this scene. And there's quite an easy trick to do this. So let's select everything we need to keep in the pattern. That means the gear and the background. So let's hold Shift and select these 3 objects. And let's hit M on a keyboard and create a new collection. And let's call these gears. And now that we have these objects in the collection, it's quite easy to just press Shift A in the scene and choose collection instance. And we are able to basically instantiate the whole collection into our scene as a new object. And it will basically show everything we have in that collection. So let's choose the gears collection and let's press G then Y and 4. We need to shift this 4 meters because that's the length of the background, and let's confirm with enter. And we need to do this on the other side as well. So let's press Shift A again, and again we'll insert the gears collection, but now we'll press G then Y and minus 4 to go to the opposite direction. And since I want to move the camera on the Y axis, I know that I will go out of bounds of the background potentially. So let's press Alt D, Y and minus 4 again. So we have this twice. And now we need to take care of this empty space right there. So let's hold Shift and select these 3 collections that we have. Press Alt D and X and move them. And we can specify minus 4 because we know we need to move these 4 meters like this. But we have an empty space right here. So just select one of them, press Alt D, Y and 4 minus and just fill the hole. And now we can select all of them, press Alt D, additionally press X and 8, because we know we need to shift them double the length of the background, so that means 8 meters, and let's confirm. So now what we have here is all of these collection instances. They can be changed. You can see they basically act as one object, and their content is based off that original gears collection. So if you make any changes in the main collection, it will change here as well. So now we have this repeating pattern that we can further edit, and it will just keep updating. So now that we have these gears animated and replicated, we can make that camera movement. So select the camera and we just go to the frame 1, and let's insert, since we are going to be moving along y-axis, let's insert single keyframe into Y location. So now we'll just go to the frame 150. Let's press G, then Y and -4 and confirm. So we shifted the camera 4 meters in the Y direction. And now right click and insert single keyframe again here. And now we can press T and choose linear interpolation again, so that the movement is constant. And now we have something like this in place, and basically that's the whole looping animation. If you play it back, you will see the camera jumps at the beginning and then starts moving again, and this will look like an endless loop. And now it's all about, you know, finishing the scene and making it look appealing and great, you know, adding some abstract elements. So first of all, let me select these two gears, and I will switch back to the cursor for the pivot point and press R, then Z, and 45 degrees I want to have them rotated like this. And additionally we can just move them around, so let's press G, then Shift Z to keep on X and Y axis and just move them towards the corner of the background. And now we can add some abstract elements. So let's, for example, shift right click here, but make sure you have your gears collection highlighted, and press Shift A, and we'll add, for example, a mesh and UV sphere. Let's tap into the edit mode, press G, then Z, and 1 meter up, so it sits on the origin point there. Tab out, and now we can scale this down and, you know, move it around, and you can see how it updates in our every collection instance. So yeah, I will just go around, you know, and place some of these. You can even go out of bounds, and that will make this, you know, seamless pattern even more realistic. If there are some overlaps, you can basically move it all the way wherever you want, just like this. And let's just make this a little bit smaller, and maybe let's add some circle right here. I will make this smaller, fill it and extrude. I will make sure that the normals are correct, and let's now find some better placement for this. So yeah, let's select this one here, place it somewhere better, and yeah, maybe something like a wall here. So let's insert a plane, rotate it 90 degrees in the edit mode, press G, then Z, move it up 1 meter again. And now we can just select these corners, press Ctrl Shift B to bevel them and increase number of cuts with the mouse wheel, and extrude. And let's find some better placement for this, and then we can shift these spheres around. Yeah, something like that. Maybe we can make this go like here. And yeah, that's your pattern basically. So now let's make it look nice by adding some bevels, you know, some materials and some lighting. So let's select the gear and go to the modifiers panel, and let's add a bevel modifier, increase the number of segments to something like 4. I want this to be quite smooth, and in the geometry section let's switch this to arc, so we have those better corners, and we can now reduce the amount to something like this. And in the shading menu we'll enable harden normals. And now let's select everything else here. So select the other gear and select the circle and the arc, and shift click the original gear and transfer the modifier by choosing copy to select it right here. And now with all of these selected, just right click and shade auto smooth, and we'll increase the angle all the way to 180 degrees so that the modifier has a full control. Now we can just select the sphere, right click and shade smooth, And yeah, basically that's it for the modeling. So let's take care of the materials. And I have downloaded a few of these materials from the Texture Haven collection, as well as some HDRI that we'll use for lighting. So go ahead, follow the links in the description to find those maps and download them. And once you have it on your drive, in your project folder, you can just go ahead and follow with the render settings I will have right here. So I will go to the render settings and enable ambient occlusion, bloom and screen space reflections for the Eevee. That's just for the preview purposes, but then I want to configure the cycles as well. I will switch this to GPU and enable some denoising here, and I will switch to optics for the denoiser, and I will choose something really low for the sampling, like 128 for the animation, so we can have our animation preview rendered in no time. And then in the performance tab I will reduce the tiling. And now let's expand this even more, and I will switch this to node editor. So we'll looking for the shader editor right here, and with the first gear selected, let's hit new here and we'll create a new material. Let's call this wood, and I want to import these maps that I've downloaded, and you can see them right here. It's the plywood, and we have diffuse, normal and roughness maps. So let's go back to the Blender, and for this to work you will need another add-on, and that's another one I'm using constantly. So go into the preferences and search for Node Wrangler, and just check the box, and then you can use some of these shortcuts in the node editor. So I will select the shader here, make sure it's highlighted like this, and let's hold Ctrl, Shift and T. That will enable the principal texture setup, and I will just locate my folder and choose the plywood textures, hold Shift and select all three, diffuse, normal and roughness, and choose principal texture setup. And that will basically create all the mapping, all the textures, and connect them into their right inputs. So a lot of work done with just one key combination with the Node Wrangler. And basically if we now hold Z and go to the material preview, we can see that we have our texture in place, although no wooden texture is now visible because we need to unwrap this. But I will just use really quick method and use cube projection. I don't want to unwrap this manually, so tap into the edit mode, press A to select all, and I will use U and cube projection. Or you can try using Smart UV Project, you know, if you want to have your islands better optimized. But I will just go for a cube projection right here, tab out, and now you can see our texture is visible. And now I will add the same texture to this part right here. So I will just select the same material from the list, and this object looks like it was already unwrapped in some way, but I will go into the edit mode nevertheless, press A to select all, U and cube projection. So we have the sides unwrapped as well. And now it's about choosing some colors. And now the second thing I want to do is to switch the node editor from object to world, and I want to add that environment texture, that HDRI. There's another link you downloaded. I recommend downloading the EXR at least 4K. Now select the background node, again make sure it's highlighted, and let's press Ctrl T now, not Ctrl Shift T, and you will see we have another full texture set up by hitting just one combination, and we can just hit open, locate our map and import it right here. So that will basically import our HDRI, but nothing is visible because we need to first of all be in material preview, but then right here we need to enable scene lights and scene world that will enable that HDRI in the viewport. And now you can see it's imported and it's affecting our scene. So let's find the sun within this angle that we have defined by camera. So let's just rotate this up, and I will use the Z rotation here on our texture mapping to locate the sun. It's right here because I want it to be shining opposite way from the camera. And now we have a setup like this. So if you hold Z and go to the render preview, this is the cycles preview with all the shadows from the HDRI light. And you can see if you keep turning the light, you can move the shadows like this. It's very easy to use. And now I will hit 0 on a numpad to have the camera view active, and hold Ctrl B and just limit our render view for the camera bounce, so we don't need to render everything else and we have a little better performance in the viewport. So yeah, let me just play with this HDRI. I think something like this might work. And now let's add some more materials. So I will select the background and make sure you are not selecting one of the instances, so you need to find the correct object. And now let's create a new material, and we can collapse this and switch it back to the timeline. We won't be needing the shader editor anymore, so let's just locate the timeline and switch it back. And now let's create the new background material right here. And I just want, you know, some bluish or maybe green tone material like this, with a little bit of a roughness. So let's increase that. And I want to keep the other gear white, but I want to give this some, you know, lower roughness, so it's really glossy, something like 0.1 for the roughness. And then I want to add the same material to this, you know, circle geometry right here. So let's add the same material. Let's call this white. And then for the spheres, we might create, you know, some darker material that will go nicely with our background. So something like this maybe. And I want to increase the roughness here. Okay, looks quite nice, and the animation is looping, but I think the lighting from the pure HDRI looks a little bit flat. So let's just add some artificial light to make this pop up more. So let's go to the frame one, but I want to make sure that my scene is looping. So by adding a global light, that will not work so well because your camera is moving, remember that. So I will just make sure that we have the gears collection selected. I will hold Shift S and reset the cursor to world origin. And now I will press Shift A and add light and area light, and press G then Z and move it up. And you can see how every collection now has this light. So no matter where your camera moves, the scene will always look the same. So let's now press R then X and I don't know, let's say 45 degrees minus to make it, you know, tilted a little bit. And let's increase the brightness to something like 250. So it's really bright, and then we can additionally reduce the HDRI because it kind of starts to fight with the area light, especially when we have a lot of them in the scene. So let's go to the shading workspace and let's go back to the world editor, and we'll set our environment strength to something like 0.8. And now we can go back to the layout view, and you can see the HDRI is a little bit milder. And now we can edit the color of that area light to make this, you know, more stylized, more colorful. And now let's go to the render settings, and in the color management we can increase the contrast to something like medium high contrast and play with the exposure. So yeah, that's the endless loop. And now just go to the output settings, you know, choose your folder for the render output and choose FFmpeg instead of PNG if you don't want the image sequence to be rendered. And now in the encoding I like to go for MP4 format and just go render animation, wait it out, and you will have your animation ready. So that's it for this endless loop animation. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and again, if you did, please leave that like, it will really help me. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more like this in the future, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.